Hello everyone, today I'll be reviewing American Graffiti. So American Graffiti came out in 1973 and was directed by George Lucas and produced by Francis Ford Coppola. And this film is set in the summer of 1962 in this small town in California. And it's about these young people who have graduated from high school and some of whom are going off to college. And it's a real coming of age story about these people that are going through this transitionary period between high school and going off into the big wide world and perhaps doing something else or maybe sticking around, depending on the decisions that these characters are making in the film. So the film really focuses on four main characters. We have a character called Steve, who's played by Ron Howard. We have Kurt, who's played by Richard Dreyfuss. We have Terry, who's played by Charles Martin Smith, who's a bit of a nerdy character. And then we have John, who's played by Paul Le Mat. And these four characters are generally the main focus of the film, although we do see other characters throughout this film. One of the reasons that this film works so well is because it's set in a very interesting period, because this period in America especially was really towards the end of the innocent rock and roll era, bearing in mind the real rock and roll era was sort of the mid to late 50s when you had most of the rock and roll music. And then, during this time was shortly before we had the Beatles and the more progressive rock and the British invasion music, and obviously before the whole hippie counterculture movement as well towards the end of the 60s. So it was really the end of a bygone era for lots of people. And it was a time when the country was a lot more innocent. Obviously this was shortly before Vietnam and the assassination of John F. Kennedy as well. And that really reflects what these characters are going through in the film, because they're coming to an end of a period in their lives which seems very innocent. Obviously lots of time in this film is with these characters spent hanging around or cruising around in their cars along the streets, or eating and drinking and just having a good time really. But really they're having to make some decisions in the film about what to do with their lives, and I think it's something which a lot of people can relate to even now, all these years later after the film has come out. One of the more interesting characters in this film is Kurt, played by Richard Dreyfuss, because he wants to go off to college but at the same time is thinking maybe he should stay behind, and he sees this pretty girl that's in this car and he thinks that she's whispering to him, and he's sort of seeking her out throughout this film. And then we also have Ron Howard's character Steve, who wants to go off to college, but he also has a girlfriend who he doesn't really want to leave behind, so he's having to make that decision as well. This is actually the second time that I've seen this film. The first time I've seen it was quite a long time ago, and the first time I watched it I really loved it. This time I still really love it, though for some reason I don't think I liked it quite as much as I did the first time. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I think I expect it to be a bit better, but I still think it is overall a really fantastic film. It's very nostalgic and very sentimental, perhaps a little bit too much at times, but it is a really enjoyable, light-hearted film to watch and really reflects that era of America. And really, I think possibly one of my favourite things about this film is the soundtrack we get. Obviously this being set in 1962, as I mentioned before, the rock and roll era, we get so many great songs in this film. We get the Beach Boys, we get Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, we get all sorts of these songs by these artists, mostly playing on the radio in the cars, or often if they're at a diner, or we're playing somewhere in the background, and it all just adds to that feeling of this era. And a lot of the music at the time, remember, it was very innocent and was, very easy listening. And then obviously a few years later we have all this rock music coming in, which was obviously a little bit heavier. And one of the characters in this film is John, played by Paul Le Mat. And at one point they actually have the Beach Boys playing on the radio, and he's with this younger girl, and this younger girl really likes the Beach Boys, but he doesn't. And he actually says that rock and roll has been getting worse since Buddy Holly died. So that's really interesting when characters say things like that, because it really reflects the time period, and especially with music as well, because music can obviously reflect what is going on. So overall, I have to say American Graffiti is a really enjoyable film, and you actually get appearances from a few other actors. You also get Harrison Ford also makes an appearance in this film, though it is fairly small, and obviously Harrison Ford went on to work with George Lucas in the Star Wars films, and obviously then went on to be Indiana Jones as well, so he's had a very successful career as an actor. And actually quite a lot of the actors went on to be quite successful in this film in shows like Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. Obviously Ron Howard was Richie Cunningham in Happy Days, and he was very successful. Though funny enough, he's called Ronnie Howard in this film. I didn't realise that. That actually made me chuckle a bit, because I've always thought of him as Ron Howard, not Ronnie. But there you go. That's obviously what he was known as at the time. So American Graffiti, very much a coming-of-age film. I can't think of much bad to say about it. To be honest, perhaps it is a little bit too nostalgic and sentimental at times, and some people may think that there isn't really much of a plot in this film, but it's really a character-driven film. It's about these characters, about the decisions and what these characters are going through during this period of their lives. And as a teenage coming-of-age film, I still think it's very good today. So I'm going to give American Graffiti a rating of 8 out of 10. I recommend it if you're looking for a coming-of-age film or just a light-hearted film. There's not much offensive stuff in this film. It's very enjoyable, and with some fantastic music as well, which obviously I myself, I really enjoy that sort of 50s and 60s rock and roll music, because, well, it's just very easy listening for me. But, you know, that's just my personal taste. You might not like that type of music, so I think perhaps if you don't like that type of music, you may not enjoy the film as much as I did. So anyway, there we go. So that is my review of American Graffiti. So what do you guys think? Have you seen American Graffiti? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Please let me know down in the comments section what your thoughts are. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.